Have you ever just sat there, maybe under the humming fluorescent lights of an office, staring blankly at a spreadsheet and wondered, is this it? Is it really an inviolable rule that to afford a decent place to live, you literally have to relinquish entire decades of your waking life to a 9-to-5 grind? Well, if you've ever felt that deep-seated frustration with the modern cubicle, the miserable commute, and that seemingly endless rat race, I can promise you, you are absolutely not alone. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to break down the mechanics and, frankly, the realities of the location-independent lifestyle. We're taking a deep dive into the digital nomad movement. It's this massive cultural shift that kind of blends tourism, leisure, and professional work into a totally unique way of living. We'll explore exactly how people are pulling this off, the strategies that make it possible, and of course, the hidden costs of this modern pursuit of freedom.
So, here is our roadmap for today. We'll cover 1. Escaping the rat race. 2. The 4-hour workweek playbook. 3. The 80-20 productivity rule. 4. Geo-arbitrage and digital nomads. 5. The neoliberal reality check. And finally, 6. Freedom or new responsibilities.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, escaping the rat race and this intense desire for freedom. There is a really profound sentiment driving this whole movement. Jacobin magazine put it perfectly, tapping right into the collective exhaustion so many workers feel today, framing it almost as a form of white-collar servitude. There's this underlying suspicion that the rules of our economy, working 50 weeks a year just to get 2 meager weeks of vacation, are just totally arbitrary. People want to master a craft, spend actual time with their families, and see the world before they hit retirement age. That burning desire to break free from the traditional system, that is the emotional engine driving the digital nomad movement. So what was the match that got thrown onto that emotional engine? Well, back in 2007, a tech entrepreneur named Tim Ferriss published The 4-Hour Workweek. And it promised an escape hatch from the 9-to-5, the ability to live anywhere, and a way to join what he called the new rich. This wasn't just a book. It was a total cultural touchstone. It catalyzed a global movement because it gave people a literal step-by-step instruction manual for abandoning the traditional career path and taking their lives on the road. Moving on to Section 2, the 4-Hour Workweek Playbook and the DEAL framework. Ferriss introduced this incredibly practical blueprint known as the DEAL framework. Let's walk through it real quick. D stands for define. You have to clearly define what drives you, set your goals, and actually write down your deepest fears about quitting the conventional path. Next up is E for eliminate, which is all about ruthlessly focusing only on what is essential. Then we have A for automate. This means outsourcing those mundane tasks and creating scalable businesses that generate passive income, literally making money while you sleep. And finally, L is for liberate. The ultimate goal here is geographic freedom, cutting that cord to a physical office so you can live and work from anywhere in the world. Now, a massive part of that eliminate step relies on this brilliant concept called Parkinson's Law. Basically, this law states that work expands to fill the time you give it. Think about it. If you give yourself a week to finish a report, magically it takes a whole week. We've all been there, right? But if you give yourself just 2 hours, you'll somehow get it done in 2 hours. By setting these strict time limits and going on a low-information diet, which means intentionally blocking out distracting news and media, you force yourself to become incredibly efficient. You stop working harder, and you actually start working smarter. Which brings us to Section 3, the 80-20 productivity rule, also known as the Pareto principle. This is the real secret sauce here, discovered by Italian economist Vilfredo Pareto, who famously noticed that 20% of the pea pods in his garden produced 80% of the peas. This 80-20 ratio pops up literally everywhere. We see it in wealth distribution, in software bugs, and most importantly for us, in personal productivity. The principle simply states that 80% of your desired outcomes will come from just 20% of your inputs. Finding that vital 20%, that is absolutely everything. In a remote working career, not all tasks are created equal. Spending hours answering routine emails might feel productive, but it generates very little real value. On the flip side, deep, focused work on a core marketing campaign or coding a new software feature, that is your 20%. If you pour your energy into that, you generate the vast majority of your results. As for the remaining 80% of low-value tasks, you either spend way less time on them, automate them, or just delegate them entirely. Next up, Section 4, Geo-arbitrage and digital nomads and the practical application of geographic freedom. Okay, mastering the concept of geo-arbitrage is the financial engine for so many digital nomads. It simply means earning your income in a strong currency, like US dollars, euros, or British pounds, but relocating yourself so your daily living expenses are in a country with a much lower cost of living. We're talking places like Thailand, Mexico, or Eastern Europe. It is a massive lifestyle upgrade. Earning $50,000 a year might make things pretty tight in a city like New York or London, but it makes you incredibly comfortable in Bali or Chiang Mai. It gives these workers the breathing room to take risks, bootstrap new businesses, or honestly, just survive working maybe 10 hours a week. But this geographic freedom doesn't just happen by accident. What's super fascinating is that a nomad's itinerary is heavily dictated by some very practical factors. First off, they usually rely on holding a strong passport from an industrialized nation, allowing them favorable visa terms, though it still requires frequent visa runs across borders. They also have to move based on the climate. For instance, abruptly leaving hubs like Chiang Mai to avoid the annual burning season, when air quality just plummets. They follow reliable internet, seek out communities of like-minded expats, and maintain a highly minimalist relationship with their possessions. They are literally traveling with just what fits in a suitcase. Let's step back and look at the bigger picture in Section 5, the neoliberal reality check and the structural reality. So, while the entrepreneurial optimism of Ferriss's playbook paints this dreamy picture of ultimate freedom, working from a hammock on a pristine beach, academic research points to a much more complex reality. For a lot of people, particularly younger millennials without well-established businesses, the reality involves some serious precariousness. They are often operating as gig workers or freelancers with wildly fluctuating incomes. They're dealing with constantly blurring lines between work and leisure, and they're operating completely outside the traditional institutional safety nets. No employer health insurance, no unemployment benefits, no 401k matching. There's actually a really profound academic insight to consider here. Some sociologists argue that digital nomadism isn't so much a rebellion against the capitalist system, but rather an opportunistic adaptation to it. They point out that geo-arbitrage is essentially the individualistic equivalent of corporate offshoring. Just as big corporations move factories to developing nations to take advantage of cheaper labor, nomads use the systemic privileges of their strong passports and affluent backgrounds to navigate global inequalities to their own personal advantage. To survive in this post-Fordist, highly flexible economy, nomads have to cultivate what sociologists call network capital. Since they are entirely disconnected from a physical workplace, their capacity to generate income relies on sustaining long-distance relationships through technology. And what's really fascinating is how this lifestyle itself becomes commodified. Many nomads monetize their own personal stories through self-branding. They sell courses, write blogs, or host retreats teaching other people how to become digital nomads. The whole project of self-realization literally turns into a form of labor. And finally, Section 6, freedom or new responsibilities. Let's look at the ultimate trade-offs. Because there is a ton of hidden meta-labor required to maintain this ethos of freedom. When the state and the corporation no longer provide a safety net, every single bit of that responsibility falls squarely onto the individual. Digital nomads have to manage clients across wildly different time zones, sometimes waking up at 3 a.m. to call suppliers. They have to constantly self-promote and bootstrap their income. They must actively navigate tricky immigration laws. They're entirely on the hook for their own private medical care and retirement planning. And perhaps most taxing of all, they have to constantly combat the social isolation and rootlessness that comes from continually saying goodbye to people and places. Which leaves us with this final provocative thought to ponder. By shedding the 9-to-5, selling our possessions, and moving across the globe, have we truly escaped the system? Or, by turning ourselves into hypermobile, self-branding, geo-arbitraging microcorporations, have we simply found a new, highly individualized way to adapt to it? It's a question that challenges the very nature of work, freedom, and what it really means to design your own life. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope it leaves you looking at your own work-life balance in a whole new light.